Okay, so what we've got here is a couple of D&D figures, a little halfling fighter and an elf archer. They're undercoated in a standard black. I've got the paints and a palette there. I figured it might be helpful if I paint along, and I mean I'm not a novice, but like I say, I'm no expert. And then we can discover together some of the changes, what I think works well for me and my style, because that's what it's all about at the end. You've got to find something that's going to work well for you and your style. G'day folks, Andy here from McDowell Manor. I tend to mix the paints. It's not a wet palette, it's a dry palette if we want to get technical. I have my selection of paints. Now believe it or not, a lot of these are over 25 years old. In fact, we had twice as many, but I had to get rid of a lot because, as you can imagine, after 25 years some of them weren't fit for purpose, which left me with a fair few, and then I also bought a couple of extras as we go. From when I was in my painting days, and I don't profess to be an expert, there was no such thing as contrast paints or speed paints. We did everything with washes and dry brushing. And even that's changed now with the advent of things like fancy dry brush brushes and stuff like that. We'll give it a crack with these two miniatures. I tend to do, when I'm doing individuals like this, I'll always tend to do two. That way I'll work on one. If I need the colour on the other one, I'll do both at once. And it gives me time, usually it'll only be on one, so I can put him aside, wait for that first colour to dry and start on the next one. So we'll just see how it unfolds, shall we? So I'm not going to call this a tutorial because it's certainly not meant to be. How about we call it painting experience number 1. So I've ended up with 3 flesh tones. Now I'd advise you to use at least 2, and I'm not talking about from orcs and stuff because obviously you're going to do them in a completely different colour that's not a flesh tone. But a range like that gives me the sort of humanish skin, a darker kind of skin and a light skin. These two are war paints. That one's Tamiya or Tamiya, however you want to say it. So what I'll do is I'll use the really light one on the elf, and on the halfling I'll use the more humanish fleshy colour. I was originally going to use that one, but I think I'll go with the normal skin colour. So let's start with the elf, shall we? Now rightly or wrongly, I like to start with the lower colours that I'm going to paint around subsequently. So I've gone with his face and his hands as it turns out. Because then I'll paint above that. I don't have to worry about the hood when I'm then subsequently if I was subsequently trying to get into the face. The face is already done. Just trying to get a base colour down. Doesn't have to be particularly wonderful because it will get tidied up as we add the upper layers. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to drop probably 2 drops of that skin colour into one of those dry palettes. I will wet my brush before I dip it in the paint, make sure I've shaped it back into a nice tip, and I'll probably remove excess paint to make sure I'm not all over the shop. I tend to use some old newspaper that I've got laying around for that very purpose. There's also some under the palette there, and we'll slap that colour on. I'll show you when it's finished. So that paint, you can see right there, is way too thick. So I'm going to add some clean water to that, thin it down, mix it in a bit, experiment on the brush. When I'm happy with it, I will apply it. It's much better to apply 2 thin coats than 1 big fat coat, because it'll never work properly with 1 big fat coat. With that 1.5 drops, hopefully you can see there's a lot of paint left over. That's fine. I've reshaped the brush, that's it in the middle there. So I've cleaned it well and largely reshaped it. Keeps it going for longer, and you can see I have added the skin colour. Now what I do, this doesn't matter if you muck up. I mean, let's face it, I'm going to paint that bow anyway, so that bit on the tip's not going to matter. The hood gets painted. That doesn't matter. Come on, focus, baby. I haven't applied a huge coat, so you can still see the lines between his fingers and stuff. In fact, I won't need to dry brush that. Not dry brush, oh well, either dry brush or wash. I won't need to do that. But what's important that you cover every bit of the bit at the bottom you want to cover. Yes, I've got some tidy up above that I've still got to do, so what? I've got to paint those areas anyway. I haven't lost any. There they are together, slightly emphasising the differences in races, which is exactly what I wanted. You'll see that the skin tones on both figures is slightly over painted. So it's hit the areas above the skin. That's fine, that'll vanish. So very happy with that. Not too much thickness. You can still make out most of the detail on all of the faces and the fingers. It's easier to see on the elf for some reason. Probably a better cast. And to work out the next colour, I'm simply going to have a look and see, is there anything else that's tucked in underneath that I probably should do now? And I'm looking there, that elf would probably have trousers on below the boots and below the armour on each leg. So we might put that on next, I think. Then we're probably getting close to doing the armour. And once we've done the armour, we'll do that above shirt. So we're at the stage with both these guys where the next lowest colour is all the metal. So it's already painted black. So really, I'm just gonna, got a combination wash and dry brush silver on there to pick out detail and make it look very metallic. So the things like those, let's call them bracelets above the elf's hands, they'll get a lot more silver and a lot wetter silver. And above that you can see his chainmail, so that'll be dry, fairly dry mix of paint. It'll just be very light brushed, dry brushed onto the links to try and highlight the raised bits but leave the little darkened recesses dark. Same with the Hobbit. So before I go any further, I'm also going to use, can you see those gaps just there in the base? That's a gap where he's fitted into the base there. You can see that perfectly. I'm going to fill those with a bit of modelling putty. And we may as well add the sand to give texture to the base as well. That way I'll see what damage I'm doing to the feet and the boots. So we've applied the silver in a fairly thick wash, but it does retain the texture. And I'll probably go around the edges of some of that and highlight it, but we'll see. You can see again, I've overpainted. That's fine, we'll just fix that later. So probably my last step will be, I'll do a couple of highlight colours on that silver yet, so metal's well and not done, but it allows me to not have to worry about those parts anymore. And I can move on to cloth now. So his surcoat and the Hobbit's cloak, which is in the back. That's probably easier for you to see there. So his cloak will give a bit of a base colour. That'll brighten the figures up. Just give you a quick look also at the lighting setup. So that light's actually pointed away from me onto the box. And there's quite a bright window, big sliding glass doors. So fairly good light. Now I want to show you what I did to get some life out of these greens. So on the Hobbit, I started with that colour and then highlighted in that colour. And if you look at his cloak here, you'll see, so it's very subtle, but it certainly does, and it's probably better out of the light. We'll let the camera adjust. There, that's probably better. Gives it depth. So she's not looking flat, and I'm quite happy with that. Now the elf has 2 shades of green. So the bottom one I did with that, the surcoat, and then highlighted in that, just like the Hobbit. But the top one I did in that, which is a darker green, and try and set that back a bit so you can see it's a darker green, and then I highlighted in that. So let's have a look at Elfie. I'll take him out the light too, because the camera coat's better. So if you look at the surcoat, it's quite light, and it contrasts. Hopefully you can see the hood looks a darker colour over a light, although it's subtle because you've got all those green shades. So hopefully you picked that up. That's better ish. Yeah, that's it. So that's what the figure looks like. How did the little fellas turn out? Well, I'm actually quite happy with them. They're right from down low. You can see I did get good texture into that elf's surcoat. And the halfling's armour's looking good. We'll turn them around so you can see the backs, which really, there you go. And again, we've got the nice shading, because I didn't want them to look like they were show ponies. I wanted them to look like they were feeling at home, camouflaged in the woods. And I think that's pretty much what we've got. So quite happy with them. And it does go to show a little bit of highlighting with a little bit of dry brush, a little bit of shading, and yeah, even an average painter like me can make something good out of it.